Hi, welcome everyone to the 10th episode in our Everything Product series and overall fourth episode in the UX mini series. I'm going to introduce the panelists to you who had done a very insightful episode with us in December. And as promised, we have brought them back. First, let me welcome Akshay Potnis. Welcome, Akshay. Akshay heads design at MessageBird. It's an Amsterdam based unicorn company. Akshay is located in the US, in California, and leads product design, visual design, brand design, and research across 15 different product verticals. He brings a wealth of experience of leading product design across quite well established products like Slack, where he was the director of design. Before that, he was at Google across multiple teams, be it Gmail, Android, YouTube, doing a lot of deep hands-on interaction and visual design. He's a designer developer at heart and really loves to design as well as code. In fact, he has been with us at GS Lab Gavs many years ago before he moved to the US. Thanks for joining us today, Akshay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Omkar. Omkar, welcome to this episode. He is the lead designer at GS Lab. And at the start of his career, he has also worked, for over a decade as a developer in Tech Mahindra, Nomura, and Cognizant. And after 13 years in engineering, Omkar has followed his inner drive for design and developed himself into an expert, as you will see. And for the last 4 or 5 years, he has been quite deep into the UX work, with a lot of our customers appreciating his quite exceptional contributions, and has handled a variety of aspects like research, design, usability testing across projects in domains all the way from telecom, healthcare, edtech, identity access management, and many more like that. Right. So, and Omkar is keenly interested in user psychology side of things, has a passion for building quite intuitive and delightful UX products. Thanks for joining us today. Right. So we'll sort of start, just right after this introductions. We have titled this episode around accessibility and how to leverage that. So I'm going to start with Akshay, with you, Akshay. So what is sort of how do you first of all look at it? For somebody who is looking at it sort of fresh like me, how would you introduce it to the audience, as well as what would be some of the first steps in building this so-called superpower?
Yeah, I'll start sharing my screen. So what I want to start with is this, like we'll go down into the details of accessibility, but how we want to start is change our perspective on looking at accessibility first and see why building a muscle for this is going to turn into a superpower for the future. But to do this, like there's a prerequisite. There are two parts of this prerequisite even before we go down into the details. And the first prerequisite is redefining accessibility for us. Now, the standard way, like we know accessibility is there are people without disabilities and there are people with disabilities, and then there's a product. And the Venn diagram part of people with disabilities is always looked at the accessible part, and everything else is looked at like at the MVP part. But if we start looking at a few examples, we'll notice that this is not like an encompassing definition. Like, for example, like here are the mouse. So for 30 years, the mouse that was just created for people who use their right hand as a primary thing, and left-handed people always struggled. After 30 years of the mouse being in the industry, someone figured out that, hey, you know what, there are left-handed people who are struggling and we need to do something about it. This is like a perfect example of accessibility. There was a complete class of people who did not have any disabilities at all, but could not just use the mouse because it wasn't designed for who they are and what they bring to the table. Another example that I'll give here is this is one of the menus that was found like when we were traveling to Paris. And Paris is like a big destination, tourist destination, but this entire menu was written in French. You couldn't figure out anything of what was actually happening there, and you expect this to be there, right? And this is another example of things not being accessible because English was not the language that was used and something else was used. Now, these have nothing to do with accessibility at all. So how I'd like to, maybe move forward is like, ask Omkar also to like share some of his examples on the same topic, and then we'll try to redefine what accessibility means. So why don't you take over, Omkar?
Yeah, right. So I completely agree with Akshay when he says accessibility is not only designing for disabilities, right? It is also designing in such a way that more and more users groups are included or can use our product. For that, we need to also accept that for certain users with disabilities, there are certain technologies developed like screen readers and all. and our product should be compatible with those technologies as well. Okay, so accessibility is designing for people with disabilities, people with different needs, and also designing for the technologies which are designed for such cases, right? As an example, if you can see, this is a regular curve that we see on the road, right? And it is designed so that cars don't run on pedestrians or trees, right? So this is obviously required for a transport. However, people with wheelchair will not be able to use it, right? So they will find it difficult to actually come onto the road if the curb is in place. So can we change this design to more accessible one? We can have this, right? So we have seen this. This is called as a curb cut, which are used so that it would be accessible for people with wheelchair. And it is not only for people with wheelchair, even kids or even strollers can be, people with strollers can use this, or elderly people who find it difficult to walk or put steps can use this. So this is how we are doing it for an inclusive community. So it's inclusive design, what we will say, instead of an accessible design. Right? Another example is that this is a nice application, which is a booklet. Okay, it is developed by a person called as Amrut in India, and his mission was to create an application which will enable users to read more books. Okay, this guy actually reads at the speed of 1200 words per minute. Okay, and what he does is that he started this application by writing short summary of the book which he reads, and his expectation was by looking at the summary, people will read the book eventually. Okay, and he started this application, and slowly he discovered that people are not into reading much, even the summary, right? Then he observed people, what people do. So he observed that people are putting headphones in their ear while traveling to train or bus, and they listen to music. So he tried to exploit that feature, and he converted his summaries into voice recorded summaries. Okay, so he actually solved that problem for people understanding their behavior. It was not per se for a particular disability or something. However, one fine day he got a call from one of his user, and she said that I like your summaries and I like to listen to those summaries so that I can get more views about different books. And he asked that girl whether, do you read book after listening to my summaries, out of curiosity. But what that girl said is that I cannot read the books because I'm blind. Okay. So in a way, it also included people with disabilities, even though the problem was not solved for them. So actually, we cannot say that accessibility is only for disabilities, but accessibility is also for people or various types of people that we have in our world. Slightly different perspective on this is a bit of philosophical one, where if you see this picture, accessibility is equity. Okay, first we will see what is equality. So equality means providing similar means to everybody. Okay, this is the picture where there is a baseball event happening, and there is a fence behind which people are watching the baseball event, and the means to access this experience is same for everybody, three boxes given to them. However, here we can see the taller person might not need that box, and for a shorter person, the single box is not sufficient. So even if we provide equal means to people, which is equality, we might not be able to give a greater experience. Okay. So can we change this scenario? How can we change this scenario? So this is how we can address this, by providing equity. Equity means providing the means based on the friction between the experience and the capabilities. Okay, and not within the user. So we are not comparing shorter person height with the longer person one, but then we are comparing the ability of a person to watch this baseball event with respect to the height of the fence. Okay, this is the mismatch. This is exact mismatch. And based on that, if we change the amount of means that we can provide to users, so two boxes for a shorter one, and no box for a longer person, then it is really an equity. So equitable experience is what we are providing. So we need to understand the conditions of in access. So in access here is actually the height of the fence, right? And with respect to the ability of a person, which is height of a person. So this is what we do in accessibility. And this is generally sufficient to provide, accessibility related things in an application. But even if we go a bit further, and if we identify the friction, and if we remove that friction altogether, this would be the ultimate experience where people even don't feel that they are different. Okay. And this is called as liberation, or even going further than this, we will call this as not only accessible interface, but it's a responsible design as well. We are giving clear, transparent access to everybody without they even knowing that they are different. So this is my view of accessible design.
Great. Thanks, Omkar, for sharing this. So essentially, from these examples, we would like to redefine it as designing for accessibility is nothing but a mismatch between user expectations and what you have designed, rather than a difference between disability and non-disability. So this mismatch word is the one that we're going to harp upon throughout this conversation today. So now this diagram changes to this. If there are people and the product and there are mismatches in between, there's no difference between people with disabilities and people without disabilities. So let's start thinking of the world as a world of mismatches and starting to reduce those mismatches in a way. And in doing that, what you would design is what would be a more accessible design or inclusive design. So this is like the definition that we wanted to get out. This is part one of the prerequisite. All right. I'll pass it on to Mandar.
Right. No, this was amazing. So I think I love that you guys have drawn the line very well and defined the context quite well. So because to me, yes, I came with that notion that it has to be around disability. But thanks for the illuminating examples. Why don't we take just a few seconds and flash the first audience question? So as our regular attendees know, we sort of throw out some interesting trivia questions to the audience just to keep the overall interest alive and just to check if everybody is participating. In fact, now I'm going to think differently about even the buildings also, right? But anyway, we have the question here. Yeah. All right. So in the field of gaming, which video game famously incorporated quite extensive accessibility features? It had customizable controls, text to speech, and options for colorblind players. So let's see what if our attendees know and what they vote for. Yeah, we can see now what the distribution is. Do you have any guesses, Omkar and Akshay?
I don't play video games much.
Okay.
Me neither.
All right. Yeah, we can see. Hey, team, we can flash the results. All right. So it's 50-50, but the Overwatch guys have it. So it's option B. All right. Hey, thanks for responding. So yeah. So now we want to sort of move to the next aspect of it, right? So a little bit of we want to jump into the motivation behind accessibility and delving deep into it. So this time, why don't we start with Omkar and please take us through it.
Yeah. So the motivation behind this is, first of all, let's understand that product life cycles do not make any space for accessibility. Generally, stakeholders say that we don't have time for accessibility. Let's build a solution first, and then we can think about accessibility if it's required. And let me share my screen. Okay. And then that's the reason we actually need to fight for accessibility, or we need to convince stakeholder that this is required and this has to be done from day one, right? But for that, we need some motivation. As a designer, we need motivation to convince somebody, right? So in my case, this is from my personal experience. If you see this object, right, these are regular fork and spoon, which we use regularly every day. This is very simple and very useful product for everybody. What happened is a few years back, my mother had an accident at home and she had to undergo a plastic surgery for her right hand fingers. Okay. And due to some complications later on, she couldn't grip the things properly, not even spoon or not even food. So she started eating from with her left hand and she started doing all things from her left hand. However, I wish I could have found this at that point of time, right? So this is nothing but an accessible set of cutlery. And what it does is that using those special spoon, you can, put your fingers inside it. And even if you don't have grip to your fingers, the spoon won't fall, and you can eat. Consider a case that such kind of person is going for a dinner with his family and friends, then he can, dine with dignity. And similarly, it's the name of the website which, sells these products, Dine with Dignity. So this particular incident, after this incident, I started thinking that life is very unpredictable. Okay, whatever you can do today, you might not be able to do it tomorrow. Might not be possible for you tomorrow, be it physical changes because of aging or certain medical conditions or certain social changes. When we say what will happen because of the social change, right? So if you consider today's families, still in few families, there are elderly grandparents can ask their children or grandchildren that, can you help me make a call to relative, or can you help me send a message on WhatsApp? Can you help me order medicines from shop, right? So this is the help which is available when we have joint family. However, while we are moving towards the nuclear families, in future, when we will grow old, we might not have our children or grandchildren with us, right, to help us with this thing. We do have latest technology which help us in day-to-day activities. So technology like mobile applications are now as common as the physical devices which we have at our home. And that's the reason it becomes more important that such applications should be designed in such a way that everybody should be able to use it independently. Okay, so that's the reason designing for accessibility it is not just for people right now in the society who needs accessibility to be addressed, but it is also for our future self. Okay, and this is what I find as a motivation to really, put foot down and talk with stakeholders that, okay, if we are designing a product, then accessibility constraints has to be understood from day one. It cannot be integrated later on, So for me, this was the motivation to get into this.
Amazing. Thanks, Omkar. So I like that, there is, as you guys described, both of you earlier in the earlier section, it's not just about the variety of users who will come to your product and use, but it's also the time arc of maybe a single user going through his or her life and some arc that they will, move across. That's very insightful. It's very interesting and an example close to you in your life. Thanks for sharing that with us. So yeah, let me go to Akshay. Akshay, how do you look at it? Where did you sort of start from, and what was your motivation?
Yeah. So my motivation was a lot more like similar to Omkar. It was a personal motivation. So when I was in my engineering college, I used to play a lot of sports, and one of my friends, like really great at playing soccer, one random day, like he started feeling that the power in his legs is going away. And then 4 weeks later, found out that he had muscular dystrophy, due to which the power in the leg just starts going away. And then 4 weeks later, he could not even walk a distance of 100 meters because there was no strength remaining in his legs. And this happens to 1 in 10 million folks. And like it is a very specific gene that just gets like changed randomly. You don't even know until it happens. And I saw it live happen. And so like that was my like first view into, he couldn't even climb steps to like get into restaurants, get into buildings, get anywhere else. And that was a very close experience that like still stays with me. So every time I find, a need to, do something about this, that's the experience that stays with me, and that's my motivation. And the reason why we bring this up is both of these are prerequisites for you to even start designing for accessibility, right? One is understanding that the world is less about disabilities, but just mismatches. And the second one is you need to have the motivation. Once we build like both these things, now we have taken the first step towards actually going into accessible design and doing the standard accessible stuff that we need to do. So this is our suggestion in general from our own experience, that if you can find these two things, I think you have taken the first step in moving forward. So we'll call this not accessibility superpower, but an inclusive design superpower. And we'll use this term throughout the conversation now. All right. Yeah.
Super.
Off to Omkar again.
Yeah, super. Quite lovely examples, and very impactful. And really, now it's not a surprise that both of you have gone so deep into very thoughtful UX and making your mark. So thanks for sharing those. Yeah, why don't we flash the second audience question? All right, so this is about Google Maps, which is one of the lesser known features there, which gives detailed accessibility information for locations, etc., specifically wheelchair accessibility, elevators, and restroom, etc. So let's see what people vote. It's fun for me to hunt these questions also, because many a times I don't know these as well, but it's fun to. All right, let's see what people have voted. Okay. So I believe the answer is D, accessible places, which nobody has voted for. All right. Hopefully, we'll all go and look it up. Thanks for responding, everyone. So we have sort of very well covered the background, how you delineate accessibility, how you fundamentally look at it, and why have you come till here. So now we want to sort of switch gears and see, okay, which are some of the common factors which affect this inclusive design, and how do you typically address those? So maybe Omkar, we can start with you.
Yeah. So before we go into factors, let's understand that inclusivity or accessibility is also an compliance requirement, which is a legal requirement. And because of that, there are certain guidelines which are defined. So let us understand what are those guidelines first quickly, and then we'll go into the details of various categories. So there is a WCAG guideline, which is Web Content Accessibility Guideline. It's a detailed document. Let me share it quickly. And yeah, so you guys are able to see it, right? So this is a very detailed document given, using which we can identify, or basically we can fix the accessibility related issues in our application, and we'll be compliant with single A, double A, or triple A as per required by the compliance. However, this document explains accessibility from the perspective of how the application is designed, or how the users are interacting with application as a common guideline standards, right? So there are 4 types by which this explains the accessibility requirements. This is based on the 4 principles, which are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means the application should be perceivable by users by various methods like touch or hearing or clicking a mouse, or they should be adaptable for all the some of the gestures, right? The new Vision Pro, you can just give a gesture to it and it operates. Then operable means it should consider the operating environments and should respond to that. For example, it should be operatable by mouse or keyboard properly, or various accessible technologies which are currently available like screen readers and all. Understandable means users should be able to understand what is there on the screen. Like it should be readable, it should be predictable, the label should be clear, the symbol should be recognizable, the instruction should be understandable, right? These are the things. How you can build these things into your application is given by WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The application should be robust, means it should be able to user should be able to use it on various devices like mobile or tablet or all the browsers, etc., right? So that user can use their choice of device to access the application. So these are 4 categories in which WCAG explains how application can be made accessible. However, for simplicity, we will see what are the different categories of users, and because of those categories, what is the mismatch that it causes and how to address those. Okay, so that would be a combined experience. So first one is vision. So with respect to this category, few people are colorblind, means they are not able to differentiate between different colors. Certain people are partially blind. This is because of the age, right? We tend to lose our eyesight, or unfortunately, certain people are blind by accident or by birth. So for partial blind users and colorblind users, generally the color contrast of a text with respect to background should be sufficient so that they will be able to perceive the information properly. And again, WCAG tells us what should be the actual contrast ratio, right? Also for colorblind users, they will not be able to differentiate between the colors. So if you want to convey a change to them, it should not be just a change of color. So if you want to say that the name field is, is having an error, we cannot just color it by red with a different color. As you can see towards right hand side, there is a symbol and an error text message, which will help user to perceive what exactly the error is. Now there are other things like these people also use screen readers, and for screen readers it is important to put the alternate text into images and links so that screen reader will read that text while communicating what is there inside the image. Also, these people might tend to zoom the screen while reading a newspaper or something from browser. So we will see this example in the next category as well. So this is about vision related issues. Then next is about motor. Motor means that, again, because of the age, we might have our hands trembling, we might lose grip, we might lose muscle strength, we might not be able to use the devices properly, specifically mouse, right? Because mouse needs a proper hand-eye coordination to put the cursor properly on the screen and then click, etc., etc. So people with motor disabilities are not well versed with mouse, so they will expect keyboard to be their device to access sites, right? Now, our application should be able to browse. We should be able to browse application through keyboard and in a logical sequence. So I'll give you an example of what do we mean by accessible by keyboard with a logical sequence. So as you can see, this is the New York Times site, and if a person is having difficulty in using mouse, he will not be able to scroll, zoom, etc., right? So what that person will do is that person will use keyboard. So if I'm using keyboard tab, you can see the focus moves swiftly to all the contents, right, in a proper sequence. So this is what we meant by a proper sequence. It also gives us user option to skip certain content, because user might not want to go through certain content like header, right? So there was an option to skip the header. So these are the options which are provided while browsing through keyboard. So this is how motor related disabilities can be taken care of. The next is about auditory. It means hearing loss. So again, hearing loss can be because of the age factor, that as we age, we tend to lose our capability of hearing, or it can be because we work in a noisy environment daily, people working in factories, or people using headphones with loud music. We lose our capacity to hear properly. Specifically, this kind of users have problem or trouble in identifying the voice or audio related content. Okay. And for that, what we can do is we can reduce the background noise of the video or audio. That is the first thing. And second thing is captioning. Okay. So closed captioning is where the audio or video is pre-recorded and we have the captioning ready for it. For example, this left-hand side. And transcripts is something for a live seminar or live video call, right? Wherein automatically the transcripts get generated. The advantage of this is that people can search, people can read whenever they want, people can jump to the correct location because of this. So this not only addresses the concern for people with hearing disability, but for the other people as well. For example, if I am not well versed with English, right, I am not able to understand everything, I can just read through transcript and I can search for whatever I want and I can get information out of it. So this is again an example of inclusivity in application. Again, for such kind of people, we can use alternate mode of notification. So generally, the notification modern modes which we have are beep or tunes, right? However, what we can do is we can utilize vibration or quick flash of the phone as a notification medium, so that these kind of people can use that. Then there are other types of disabilities. We can combine them into brain-related disabilities, right? So related to perception and cognitive disabilities. So this includes cognitive disabilities like ADHD, or people who have psychological issues like fear and all. Some neurological issues because of which they are not able to perceive things properly. They are not able to recognize things properly, right? They are not able to remember more, lot of things. They are not able to comprehend what is there on UI. So this kind of things also needs to be addressed, because this kind of disabilities are increasing day by day. So for that, what we can do is we can avoid distractions on screen. We can avoid flashing images. This is specifically for people with photosensitive epilepsy, right? We can avoid such flashing images so that the people will not get discomfort. We can use simple icons, simple images which people can relate to. We can help user understand the meaning of whatever is there on screen. We can help user understand the consequence of the action before the action is being taken. And so this is one of the example, right? So if Google wants people to understand how a particular word is pronounced, it gives various options, right? It tells user how it sounds like with a pronunciation guideline, phonetic notation. Then it helps user to choose the accent, whether it's Indian English or UK or US. It shows user how to make lip movements by visually showing it. And it also helps user with slowing down the pace of it, so that user will be able to perceive better. So such kind of interfaces are very useful for people. And these are the common, we can say, disabilities or categories of users which we need to consider to provide the solution.
Quite a wide variety of examples you have given. So it's bringing out those points quite well. So coming to you, Akshay, now. So, there is clearly a lot to be done, a lot to be thought about. So as a designer, a question may pop that, how difficult is all of this to do? How would you sort of handle or advise designers who are sort of getting into this sort of thinking?
Yeah, I do agree. Like, that's going back to the earlier point we made is like product life cycles don't give time for this, which means as designers, like we have very less time to do this. And like the WCG guidelines is like a 80-page document that who has time to go through that? Even with the motivation and the understanding, it's a lot of work. So I want to dispel this myth that it's hard to do, because I'm going to show you certain tools which make this job so much easier and like how we can actually use it. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and share like a demo now, which is going to be in Figma. And I'm going to show you like a few ways in which we could do this. Right. So here is a plugin called Stark, and it is like a plugin that you can add to your design files, and it gives you everything. So for example, contrast was one thing that we talked about, Omkar talked about. So here is, I'm clicking on the button and I'm going to the contrast area, and it's showing me already that, hey, AA contrast is there with the button, AAA contrast is there, but AAA is not going for the normal text on this button. This text is actually compatible with everything. My box is compatible. This text is compatible. And then if it is not compatible, it also gives suggestions. So here I can just pick the suggestion and like change the color here, and suddenly like it's already compatible. So quickly you can just click on one button and get that out. Similarly, typography. So as I'm clicking on the type, it is showing me whether the font size is right for people who have like, disabilities of viewing certain things. If the text is too small, it's not visible. You can just hover over these things and it tells you whether you have the right font sizes that you have chosen. Alt text is another example. So this is the text that actually shows up when, when the hover over every item happens and what is being heard by the screen reader that's calling out those things. So here I can just add like, okay, for this particular thing, alt text is, this is generate button, and I just add this here and say done. And here now on the side, you can see that all text for this has been added. So when I share this with the developers, rather than them trying to go through everything, they get all of this very well defined in here. Similarly, focus order was one of the things that Mandar was showing. That can also be added here. I can go to focus order, say, okay, first focus will go on the text, then focus will go on the text box, and then the focus will go on the generate button. So you have 1, 2, and 3, and the focus order will show up here when the developer actually opens this up. So when some developer comes into this file, rather than asking them to go through everything and figure this out, like it's simply given to them in a way that is very easy to digest and convert it to something that can be done very, very quickly. So on both sides, these tools are helping us as designers also to move really quickly, and for developers also to get that and put it into the product. So once we start using these, what happens is that friction that's there in our minds, whether as designers or developers, starts going down a bit. And there are a lot more things in here which I'll not go through. There is like vision simulator. So for example, like I can go into this button and then go to like simulation and say, okay, generate simulations. Let's say we go down here and say it for protanopia. This is how the button will look for protanopia. This is how the button will look for someone with blurred vision. This is how the button will look for loss of contrast. And you can quickly see, without spending any time, how these things are affecting and probably make those changes really, really quickly. And this is just one tool that I'm talking about. There are hundreds of tools like this that have been created. And even if we don't do all of this, even if we do 1% of this, we're still taking a step towards making our designs more accessible. So in general, what I wanted to do is dispel the myth that it's hard to do as designers. Like if you start using these tools, it's very easy. I use these tools daily. I use it in my work today. I've been using it for the past 4 years. And by default, my workflow has become very, very simpler because of these existing. So this is the third step, which is like we know the basics, and now we're just dispelling the myth that it's harder to deliver. You can use this and you can deliver it in very less time. All right, pass it on to Mandar again.
Very interesting. So it's great that you actually showed it in action, because a lot of times during development and as well as in design, we want those closed feedback loops also, right? So as you said, it's the tools are taking that guesswork out of it. If I'm not able to imagine certain variety of disability, or even if it's not a disability, it's some preference, whatever, it's really helping me visualize it, and then design it accordingly and develop. So I think amazing demo of the tools, right? So thanks for that. Maybe we can take a quick, little break and do the third audience question now. And then after that, we can delve more into actually the superpower side of things. So while the team is bringing up the questions. Yes. So which popular social media platform introduced the automatic alt text generation using AI to then make images more accessible to visually impaired users? I think these people might be able to guess very well. Okay, we can see what our audiences voted for. Okay, so it is Facebook, but yeah, I think we'll go with that. From my reading, it's Facebook. Hey, thanks everyone for responding. So yeah, so we'll going back to Omkar, right? So now we have sort of set the stage of what it is, how you guys look at it, and also trying to dispel the myths that it's too much work, etc. So clearly, you guys have demonstrated well that for a thoughtfully done UX, there is a lot to be gained. The friction can be reduced very well, and it's also not necessarily difficult for the designer to do. Just that thought and intent has to be there. So now, in our title of this episode, we have also called it a superpower. It's about taking that design to the next level. So in general, I want to sort of broadly answer it and then just give it to you guys to delve into it. That how do you look at that quote unquote superpower aspect of it, and when you think about the future of sort of product design, how do you mesh this together? So maybe Omkar, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So as we can see, we saw what is the motivation or how motivate what was our motivation to think about accessibility or inclusive design. Then certain basics about how inclusive design can be achieved. And the third step was how to deliver that to a developer so that whatever we expect as a designer will be correctly implemented in a product. Okay. So with these three steps ready, we are now ready to understand how accessibility or inclusive design is important not only for today's environment but for future as well, right? So first step is that if we practice this regularly in our applications, whatever work we do or the way we talk to other stakeholders as well, we as a designer will be proficient in one by identifying that what is the correct context. Like we saw baseball's example, right? What is the context? The context is people wanted to view the baseball match, right? Then we can identify what is the friction. The friction was fence, right? And then what are the means that we can provide to reduce the friction with respect to people ability and the actual mismatch. Okay. So this is the muscle that we are building slowly as we practice this regularly. And there are two things. So first one is that once we practice this regularly, we will build this muscle of accessibility or inclusive design. We will start thinking about all type of categories when we design in the application. And the second one is with respect to the future of the applications, right? Where we see only AI everywhere, right? So with AI, we are kind of developing a disability. All of us is a kind of intellectual disability, we can say, specifically with the applications which are related to conversational AI. Okay. So I'll explain why I'm calling this as intellectual disabilities. That with conversational AI like ChatGPT, we tend to ask everything to ChatGPT to get our work done. And the worst thing is that we believe whatever AI ChatGPT says is true. Okay. So even the regular stuff like sending an email or creating a presentation, creating a chart, we are asking ChatGPT to give us answers, right? Or DALI to create images, something of that sort. And to go ahead, we even ask certain cultural questions as well to AI, which is dangerous, right? And even ethical suggestions, right? I mean, imagine how AI would understand about my complex relationships at home and give me solution based on that, right? So we need to understand how AI works. Okay. So AI works by first capturing the context through the prompt that we give, and then it identifies the context with the prompt, and then it identifies the matching information with the data which it has collected throughout the open documents which are available on internet as a training data. Now we have seen that most of the training data is in form of news, and we all know that since ages the news was always delivered to create some biases within the particular category of users. So news is not always authentic, right? This might be a bold statement, but news is not always authentic. And if such kind of data is getting fed to an AI system, first problem is that even the training data is faulty. I mean, somewhat faulty, not the completely faulty. And then the kind of questions we are asking are again difficult for AI to understand, right? I mean, how my relationship should be with my office colleagues or my relatives and all. So this kind of things is AI will give you the answer for sure, and it will give you answer in such a way that you will believe that okay, yes, I mean whatever AI is saying, it's correct. I should take that action. So this is the intellectual disability that we are developing slowly. We even believe that AI did our psychoanalysis as well, based on the prompt that we give, but it is not the case, right? A dedicated professional is the only person who will be able to understand you properly to give you the response. Now, how designers will help here? Okay, so designers, as a designers, we already built a muscle wherein we can understand the context properly, we can identify the friction, and we can identify a mismatch that might happen if there is a change in understanding of the context, or there is a uh, change in the data which needs to be analyzed to give this response. Okay. And if we can identify that earlier, we can give feedback to AI systems and the output of AI will be improved. Okay, so it is that link. First, we are building our muscle to understand the problem context and the friction. Then we will understand what are the things that AI will give output for. Will there be a mismatch? And then we can give feedback to the system, and system will improve over the period of time. Okay. One of the example of this is so you just asked this question, right? Which application explains images, right? And people said it's Instagram. Now, what will happen if we, don't use any pre-decided alt text, and we rely upon whatever AI gives it to you? Okay, what will happen? If you see this example, what AI will tell us is this is a picture of a jungle with green eyes and red hood and green background, etc., etc. Because AI identified it as a regular image, and it extracted the features out of it and explained it. But AI does not know what is the context. But we as a designer will know that this image is to be explained with the context of the famous photograph that was captured in 1984, and then after a few years they again found this girl, and then etc., etc. So as a designer we can give meaningful information to the expected application or expected result as whatever AI wanted to generate. And by doing this, again, I would repeat, so we build a muscle, we identified context, we could identify friction, we could give this feedback as input to AI systems. And because of that, AI systems can now be inclusive. And the ultimate aim, or I would say it is an integral part of AI systems to be inclusive. So AI system cannot say, okay, I only work for a B2B application and I only respond to, with my bot and to answer their regular queries to solve their land related issues, right? So for AI systems, it is very important to be inclusive in whatever responses which we give, because we are building this intellectual disability. We are believing whatever AI says is true. That's the reason now the responsibility is more on AI systems to give the correct answer, because people might not take second opinion. Okay. And this is where, as a designer, we can contribute towards the fact that we know accessibility or inclusiveness better, and we can provide feedback to AI systems. So we are not eliminating the AI systems, but we are complementing AI systems with the feedback. So this is my perspective on it. What do you think, Akshay?
Got it. So I like that, you had used a term earlier, which was responsible design. I think what you described, and I like your philosophical touch also, that, we are sort of, sometimes we tend to forget that, hey, it's after all a technology which is trained on a certain data set, which is open. Not all of it may be factually correct. It will have its own biases. So I think, point beautifully brought out. So yeah, Akshay, what do you, how do
Yes,
you
yes.
look
I
at it?
think Omkar talked about a lot of points, so I'll just like quickly summarize them together with like a few examples. So I think this is why we're calling this superpower. If we build this muscle, like I think it will help us in this new world that we're marching towards, right? We're marching towards a world of AI-driven applications, and a lot is unknown. So we are going to encounter a lot of unprecedented mismatches as a part of this, and we are seeing that. One example is the Gemini issue that happened just recently, 1 month ago, where it was asked to, generate founding forefathers, and these are the images that it generated. And there was a big backlash because it did not understand the cultural context of what it was asked to do, and like that was missing altogether. This is like a mismatch there. Or the second mismatch is like a very funny one, which is Balenciaga Pope, where somebody generated like a image of Pope wearing Balenciaga sweatshirt, and that they forgot to understand the context that this is against the cultural thing of what Christians believe in. This is not how they, wear their coats. And it was a religious sentiment that was hurt because this happened. And this is not by design, like it's just happening. And because we did not even think about these as mismatches. And so this is just the beginning. As we design for this world, we are going to encounter hundreds of such mismatches, like the one that Omkar talked about, like I am showing, and some that we don't even know at this point in time. So we need to be prepared, and we need to build a habit of identifying them early. So that is why this thing that we talked about, the design for accessibility, is going to help us identify those mismatches, because the world that we're going into is like a world where we all are, a part of those mismatches, because accessibility is no more a physical disability. It is also an intellectual one, and we are all a part of it. Hence the word superpower. So this habit would help us building towards a much more secure and less scary world, not just for others, but for our future self and the future self of everyone as a humanity that we're going towards. So that's why like building the superpower is very, very useful. We should practice it now so that our application that we're building become a lot more better as we're doing it. Thank you.
Amazing. I have one question, and maybe either of you can take it or both of you. So, as the pool of people who are using all such technology widens, right? So, in age, it is widening, right? I mean, there are younger folks, students, even children who are interacting with technology, as well as there are now older folks who are doing it, who may not have grown up in their day and time. They may not have grown up with the technology. So we are adding sort of the two ends of age brackets. So that is one part of my question. The other is that pools like people who have different languages that they are more comfortable with. So they are also being added throughout the world to the pool of people who are using the technology on a daily basis. So they are not only maybe people who are native English speakers or who understand English very well, or the major languages, but more languages that they are comfortable with. So have you guys come across examples of how to make this wider, or rather reach to this sort of a wider user pools, whether it is age or language, or there may be some other criteria. So if any interesting examples that if you have seen, any of you can take.
Yeah, I can give one. Yeah, okay. Omkar, go for it.
Okay. So in my view, as we anyways have this kind of user set available, from a kid with 13 to 14 years having a mobile phone in his hand to the elderly person like 80, 85 years of age using mobile for their daily work, right? Or daily course like accessing it for reading newspapers or chatting with their relatives or asking, ordering medicines or food, etc., etc. So we already have this set of users available, and along with that we also have various assistive technologies developed for it. So assistive technologies like um, screen readers, right? We said, right? Screen readers or the features to convert text to speech or speech to text. Then there are magnifiers available. Apple is a very good example of how they, have more and more assistive technologies in their OS, specifically mobile. So with new developments in AI, we have to see that can we utilize the existing knowledge of assistive technologies and take it to the next level. One of the example would be currently from your voice, it converts that into text. Can AI technology read your lips and convert that into text? Okay. Or can it identify your hand gestures and convert that into text? Again, there are various types of languages, even when people are using as a sign language. It is same as that of different, spoken languages that we have. So can we build engines to work on top of this and provide more assistive technologies? And obviously now it is more responsibility of a designer to, include those accessibility tools as well into the design. So this is how we can do it. We don't have to create something which is out of the world or something which is very new. We can build on something which is already there and, just improve it based on what are the new announces that we found in the world.
Got it. Yeah, Akshay, last couple of
Yes.
minutes. So over to you. Yes.
Just to tell you now, I got a notification here. Confirm your speaking language. It sounds like you might have switched to a different language. Please update so that we can provide better quality of transcription. So this is what it is, right? This is a live example. So it detected that it might not be English. Can you help us with the language? So this kind of things we can build on. Yeah, Akshay.
Yeah. So I have two examples. One is there are certain tech, ways that have been built right now which can take care of these things. Like, first way is called RHLF, which is like real human feedback loops into the AI systems themselves. For example, like in one of the apps that I worked at Google, we had a home tab. And the translation of home to like, Marathi was Mukhya Prushti or Hindi was Mukhya Prushti. And that's not the colloquial way like people would want to see it. It would be HOM, like that would be the translation, which would be much more natural. So humans can add context, like Twitter has the community notes feature, which is basically a news, and then you are adding context to that particular thing and making it a lot more better. So that's one type of thing that's coming becoming very, very common to like make the models a lot more better. The second one is called constitutional AI. Like this has been developed by a company called Anthropic, who develops the AI engine called Claude, which is similar to GPT. And what that does is every company can now build like a small book of a culture that they form in. So GS Lab would say we work this way. We are these many employees. Our process is this. Like this is how we meet. This is how much time we spend. And then that is then provided to the model. And now the model is outputting something that is very, very similar to what fits within the GS Lab context. So there are a lot of small things that are being developed right now, which can be potentially integrated into your work. And that can help those models become better. So where I'm going towards is, it is our equal responsibility to actually make those models better and provide feedback. And only when we do that, will those models be more, colloquially, contextually, culturally, more significant and more closer to who we are than like, just letting AI build whatever they want to. So I think that's what I'm seeing throughout different things that we're working on Gen AI at this point.
True.
Wow, fascinating angles, right? So I think thanks both of you for bringing out a variety of different angles. And first of all, even the overall outlook of how we should be looking at accessibility. I think that was my biggest takeaway from this Thanks for an insightful conversation. Thanks for spending this hour with us. To all our attendees, thanks for attending. We have now completed 10 episodes of this series. They are going to be available on the company website, as well as some of them are there on LinkedIn Live as well. So check it out, do share them in your networks as well, and have a good day ahead. Thanks.
We do have a question, but we'll answer that maybe like separately and then send that answer to Chinmay, who has asked a question, which is important. But since we're at time, we can answer it separately on a separate thread and like send it to him.
Sure, yeah, we'll send it out for sure. Hey, thanks everyone. Have a good day ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.